Good to go.
Big smiley faces. All right. Do all founders have a story? That's the question we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Wikibrands Collective Webcast, Growth and Scale, number 3, talking about founders, stories, and connection. My name is Doyle Buehler, and we are the Wikibrands Collective Transformation Webcast. We are an on-demand collective of professional transformation talent that is rocking the boat on the wave of disruptions. And this is the Business Scale and Growth website episode, a regular rundown of what it takes to achieve solid business growth. The storytelling journey is where we're going to go today. I'm delighted to be joined by our guests. I have Mike Reid from Dent Global, working from Toronto. I've got Barry Hillier from Equo Toronto as well. Sean Moffitt, Managing Director, Wikibrands from Toronto. And hey, I'm all the way back here in Australia, so spanning the Pacific.
The table.
Yeah. All right, so let's meet our amazing guests. Mike Reid, quickly tell a little bit about yourself. Actually, you don't need to be quick. Take your time.
Okay. So thanks for having me on, guys. For those who are listening, I co-founded a training and advisory company called Dent Global, and we operate in the UK, USA, Singapore, Australia, and we're going to be launching into Canada this year. And what we're most well known for is running a 12-month accelerator program called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. And over 12 months, we help take traditional service-based small business owners, people who are very good at what they do. They're standing on a wealth of value and intellectual property, and we show them how they can position themselves and package that value to really scale their business and stand out as the go-to obvious choice within their industry.
Fantastic, and looking forward to hearing some stories from you, Mike. We also have Barry Hillier from Equo Toronto. Barry, tell us about yourself, please.
Well, first, thanks. It's great to be here, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, and this is my 4th company. And I built up a digital ad agency and 2 SaaS-based companies that I sold in 2017. And that entire process, I was a bootstrapper for about the first 13 years. Then I raised $2 million in 2014. And the entire process really made me realize a few things. That entrepreneurs really have a problem funding, building, commercializing, and scaling companies. And unfortunately, most tend to be underutilized, underleveraged, underfunded, underconnected, which I know is a big theme for today. And so what I decided to do is I worked together with an incredible team of founders, investors, and supporters to build a distributed marketplace that actually aligns resources for entrepreneurs, finding what they need when they need it, and enabling them to be able to scale. At the end of the day, anybody can launch a company, but whether it fails or succeeds is really based on a lot of factors, and we're hoping to bring those factors more to those entrepreneurs so that they can be more successful.
Definitely. Excellent. Thank you, Barry. I'm looking forward to talking more as well. And then finally, we have Sean Moffitt. Sean.
This is going to be an interesting discussion because typically we look at some of the topics we talk about, Doyle, and we look at it from a dispassionate distance, but this is almost autobiographical. I'm a 3-time entrepreneur. I've known Barry and Mike for a while now, and so as much as I would love to say, you know what, I love hanging around with corporate boards and executives, really, who do I like hanging around with? I like hanging around with entrepreneurs because it's like there's that rare group of people in that world that say, you know what, I got this idea and I think it actually might be interesting for the world to know about it. And so I'm interested to what we come up with today.
Yeah, fantastic. No, looking forward to it as well. And my name is Doyle Buehler, as I mentioned, based out of Australia, and I run a strategic digital consultancy on digital transformation. And my entrepreneur story goes back a long time as well, back in, I think it was 2002, but anyway, we'll get into that later. So we want to talk about, stories and founders and their stories. And Mike, maybe you could start us off with, why is this story really important here?
Look, I think what we've experienced, we've had 3,000 founders come through our accelerator around the world. And what we realize is that they're all standing on a mountain of value and they've all got a really interesting story to tell. And when you can particularly for a traditional service business where the value of what they do is based on what the founder has in their head, when we can start to connect the dots of their story and see that there is based on the DNA of everything that they've done in their life to date, there is a unique story for them to tell. And is that unique story that really helps them differentiate and position themselves as unique within the market. And so our experience is when we can peel back the layers of their personal story, their business's story, help them really understand their customer's story, and package that into a really powerful way to communicate it through a pitch. For many of our clients, they go on to even write a book about their area of expertise in that story, and that's just a really powerful way to leverage their story. And when they do, that's the thing that really helps them stand out, differentiate, and scale their business.
Excellent. And Barry, what do you think is important in storytelling for founders and for yourself too?
I think it's finding your story first. The whole process of really understanding your vision, I think, is such a strong, passionate insight that got you going. But entrepreneurs take time to evolve it in their own head. And what's happening is that entire process of presenting what is in your head clearly to investors, to potential partners, to the world outside, what you think is clear is not clear, and you only realize that often as a founder in hindsight. And so even when we were developing Equo, my background goes 25 plus years in communications and marketing and branding. And I was talking with one of our early founding advisors, Peter Aceto, who's the former CEO of ING Direct. And ING Direct in Canada has such a clear brand message. But even he was saying that took them a lot of time to get that level of clarity. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs really need to recognize that it's going to take time, and every, not even misfire in understanding the story, but every opportunity to tell your story will make that next opportunity that much clearer, that much better.
And I think it's a distillation process. It happens over time. For many of the people we work with, it probably takes them 12 months to get to the point where they can really answer the question, what do you do, in a powerful way? And they come into our process and they've been doing what they do for 10 years, 20 years, but when they get up and pitch and communicate what they do, they just can't really capture the essence of why they're unique, why they're valuable, and it's with structure and time that it takes, kind of, in our experience, about 12 months with the right structure to really distill it down into something that's pithy, concise, and punchy.
I find there's like an added element with an entrepreneur versus maybe a CEO, where it's not only finding the story, to Barry's point and to your process, Mike, but it's also living it, right? I find a lot of the founders aren't naturally necessarily extroverts. So as much as it may not be germane to talk about themselves in a certain way, just to be able to live themselves that way and actually be that center of attention is uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I find it's, even if you got the right story and you've codified it and minted it and it comes out of their mouth, a lot of times it's like, do you want to embrace the chalice here that is, you are the center of attention and lightning rod for this company? I find it's an interesting business situation because CEOs can hire other people to be part of that. I think most entrepreneurs need to have some center point in terms of telling and living that story.
And understanding to that point, Sean, you've got to be forced to break through your uncomfortable zones. I'm very comfortable presenting our story in a boardroom. I'm very comfortable presenting a keynote at a conference. I'm very uncomfortable in this kind of situation with a camera. But you know what? You gotta just face it, and you just have to figure out how to deal with it, because you're going to have so many opportunities to tell your story, and there will never be enough. So when you get an opportunity to tell your story, even if it's in an uncomfortable place, do it. And then the more you do that, again, the less uncomfortable it will become and the clearer your story becomes.
Yeah, I think one of the things I talk a lot about is prolific beats perfect, right? And it's like the more times you can get out there and just be prolific with that storytelling, the more you can distill it. I think about someone like Martin Luther King, for example, who was this incredible storyteller, and it wasn't until the pitch that changed a nation, or the story that changed a nation, was the story that had already been told hundreds of times before. He was roaming the country telling the story over and over and over again, and it wasn't until the 100th time he told it that it really had the really powerful shift.
But what is the intent of the story here? And just to clarify here, there seems to be a couple of distinctions of story. There's obviously the founder story, but then there's also sort of the story with the pitch and the journey that we're taking the customer on. Do you guys see the sort of a distinction there, or are we talking the same thing?
I think it is all part of a really interesting storyline that isn't about one character or one opportunity. If you watch a movie, there's a lot of individuals that pop into scenes. There are certain individuals that maybe they're shorter, but they have a huge impact. And it's the culmination of an evolving story that starts to change from the vision of what the company is going to become to what actually becomes the company itself, its culture, its people. And all of those little stories of key moments become those rallying cries within the company that will help further propagate what type of culture you're going to have, how fast you're going to grow, what you value, what you don't value. And so the interesting thing is that the story, even though it starts with the founder, it quickly evolves far beyond the founder.
I think what happens for a founder as time goes on is you collect stories, and you kind of end up having a little arsenal of stories that you can go to. But I think depending on who you're talking to, depending on the audience you're talking to and what setting you're in, I think it's useful to know what are the right stories to pull out in the right order, to be able to take someone through a narrative in a way that kind of communicates things like credibility up front. And you can kind of establish that before I kind of get into some of the stories I might talk about our market's problems, for example, I can tell a story that helps me establish I've got credibility and authority to talk about those problems. Does that make sense? So it's I think the combination of you end up collecting all these amazing stories to tell. It could be one of the stories of how the business founded and whatever it may be, but that telling that story might just be a really great way to establish authority and credibility, in the same way Barry kind of told a bit of the story of how he raised capital to begin with, and that establishes that background and that credibility and authority. And then you can kind of go deeper into the narrative, talking about another story that talks to the major problems that entrepreneurs face, for example.
I think that's a big part, Mike. I think I find bad entrepreneurs, if they make the story about themselves and don't make that link to, well, why is that important to the business or the customer that you're in front of? There's almost a cardinal, I hate to say it in this Instagram age where it's like bordering on narcissism, kind of like, I got into business because I was frustrated because I was in a corporate world and I wasn't getting attention, or I'm not getting something out of my personal life. So this is my opportunity to creep out from behind the camera. And I find
because you wanted to drive a Ferrari, Sean.
Well, maybe they think that's where it's going, but I think I find there's a healthy disproportion of entrepreneurs that make it all about themselves. And I think what we have to maybe make entrepreneurs comfortable with is tell the story about yourself, but it's not about self-aggrandizement, but it's about being able to capture benefits so personally that customers get it, right? I think that's the end game.
We don't, I mean, fundamentally, I mean, the founder story is interesting, but it's not about how, I think it's not about how awesome you are, really. It's well, how are you going to actually help me? So if you want to tell me a story, fantastic. I'm game to listen, but you know what? Focus it on, like you said, Sean, the benefits and what you can actually do with it.
Yeah, I mean, either work, I guess, right? Do you want to be Mark Cuban and Gary Vaynerchuk on the far right pole, or do you want to be like a Tobias Lutke and kind of there's a healthy group of entrepreneurs that are very introverted, right? Both styles work, but I think having a customer-based orientation is important.
Okay.
Yeah. I look to someone like a Neil Patel, for example. I don't know whether you guys would agree he's introverted or extroverted, but when you look at his stuff, he's an incredibly influential guy. He puts out a huge amount of content, but at the heart of who he is he's a kind of marketing and tech nerd and geek, right? And when you watch his content, that's completely irrelevant to his ability to be able to have a huge amount of influence with an enormous audience that are raving fans of him. So yeah, I do agree. I think from it's a good question, Doyle. I'm to be honest, now that I'm thinking about that, I'm not sure how I would answer that. I feel like talking about the story of how you've executed in business is really talking about the story of why you've got authority and credibility. But I think you want to establish that early on in building a relationship with an audience. But once you've established that, you don't need to dwell on it. It doesn't need to be about you. You can the focus of the conversation, the focus of the storytelling thereafter needs to be focused on how you can solve problems for the audience.
Which would be like the execution side of things, getting it done, right?
Yeah. I guess that's one way you could look at it.
Yeah. Barry, what do you think? Is there a separation here?
I think I think when I look at who I connect with most, telling their story, even if they're introverted, because I actually like the realness of it. I hate using that word authentic, but I want to understand that notion of why did they start it? Who are they? What are they trying to achieve? And telling it in a simple way, not directing it at an investor, directing it at another human being and making me understand what drives them. One of our investors was Peter Schwartz. And what I loved about him when we met him was he said he thinks 30-second elevator pitches are bullshit and 5-minute pitches are bullshit. It was hard to get his time, but when I got his time, he gave us 90 minutes. And he felt it took 90 minutes to understand who the people were, understand the business, and actually have a meaningful conversation. And that stuck with me right away because now I felt like I was talking with somebody that actually wanted to hear what we were doing, who we are, and give us an opportunity that he could still say, I'm not interested, but that we could walk away knowing, okay, we did our best and we didn't flub 30 seconds because we just couldn't get it out and we had, cotton mouth. So I don't know if I answered your story, but
I think that's so compelling, though, right? Like,
it is.
We've become so formulaic in how we like to receive our little sound bites of either stories or material, like the 20-minute TED Talk and the 3-minute pitch, and and I think, if I think about entrepreneurs, they almost have two different challenges, don't they? It's like, I need funding and investors, and I think you might be right, Barry. 90 minutes might be like that. Like you're really investing in the person. How long does it take you to understand what a person and what makes them tick? I find, you get 3 years into a business and maybe it's succeeding. All of a sudden there's this different challenge of I am no longer the center part of that equation, right? And so I'm bringing professional people into my business. They're telling me to operate in different ways. How does my story then change when I am a scaling business and it's no longer the Barry Hillier story, but it's I've got 30 people in this company and they're all doing great things and it's maybe bigger than me now, right? So it's an interesting conundrum.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the interesting things is when you take a look at a lot of the venues and what we're asked to be innovative, we're asked to disrupt, we're asked to do all of these things as entrepreneurs. But then we get placed in situations where it's really a one-way dialogue. And it's often focused where you're trying to tap into what that other person wants. And at the end of the day, what does the entrepreneur want? They want to have a relationship. They want to have a true partnership. They want to have meaningful dialogue. And if you look at all of these different situations, what I found interesting is this speed dating approach. If we actually applied that to our entire life, it's not a good model, and you don't really get to understand who they are. So investors are missing out on opportunities, and you don't get an opportunity as the entrepreneur to really feel comfortable also that this is the right fit for you. It's not just about whether they think your story is compelling. It's a matter of, can you actually create a relationship that you're adding another individual into your future story within the company that's going to have a positive impact. And I think as entrepreneurs, we need to push back a bit more, because this isn't just about an exit, and it's not about, a lot of the elevator pitches that seem to become the sole focus for a startup. I think it really misdirects a lot of entrepreneurs.
I think it puts you into a place where you need to step up and perform almost. It becomes a performance more so than actually really, telling a story in a real or an authentic way. It's but it's on the other hand, it's then hard, Barry, I think, to how do you create the right filtration mechanisms? I guess part of where the idea of a pitch comes in is it's about how do you quickly filter, something that's valuable for you or not. And I think it's a difficult balancing act. I agree. I think a really rehearsed or this sort of performance pitch isn't the answer, but we also need a way to be able to tell a story in a concise way at the same time too.
Fully agree. I think though that before everybody gets into a room, everybody's done a little bit of due diligence. The entrepreneurs refine the story, and the investor or the partner or whomever it is, including potential employees. I mean, to me, each of those, the right employee can have a massive impact, positively or negatively, on your company. So I think more preparation on all parties, so that when you get into a room, there's clarity of why you're in the room, and each party isn't wasting their time. Think of how much time we waste collectively telling our stories to people at the end of the day really don't care.
Yeah, there can be a lot of those. How do we make it compelling then? Like Mike, you said concise, but and Barry, you said you have to be clear, but how do we actually make a story compelling? Because we are going to have to massage this. We are going to have to kind of build it and grow with the story as well. But how do we really make it compelling, or what's really important to make it compelling?
Okay, well, look, from my perspective, I think a compelling story obviously has a lot of emotional connection to it. I think we connect with other human beings, we connect with a brand, we connect with anything based on emotion. So there needs to be an emotional hook. However, before getting to that emotional hook in a story, personally, I feel it's important to create clarity up front and to establish a problem you may be solving, depending on what setting you're telling a story in. Our story is such a broad term, but from my experience, I don't think an audience cares as much about a person and connecting with them emotionally until such time as they can be clear on how that storyteller can be valuable to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's
I've Mike, have you not been there before where it's just like 15 minutes into the story, you still don't know where the punchline's going in a bad way, right?
Exactly.
I find there's so much exploration of what the problem is and how disruptive the world may be. And I'm just I'm okay on going on that dance, but just give me that hook that says, here's what your single-minded promise to the world is, so I know there's some context here. I find I'm probably more on the side of declare what you are up front and then add in a whole bunch of support behind it, as opposed to a lot of, and maybe they've been trained this way, but a lot of people that explore the problem in detail and try to humanize themselves And then 20 minutes in, you're left with, well, but what do you do, right? Yeah.
I look at a lot of the stories similar to entertainment. At the beginning of Star Wars, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. I mean, they hooked you in early and established a problem early. And at the end of the day, though, you now need to establish why that audience that's in there should care. And so why they're going to care as an investor is get those financials up front and tell them how they're going to make money. If it's a partner, tell them how you're going to help them change their world, their team, and help them achieve their goals. By bringing them into your story early, you're going to create a lot more connection. You still need to have the clarity. I agree with every single thing that Mike and Sean said prior. Your audiences to a science fiction community that hates horror. You're going to fall dead. But if you've got clarity and if you've got the right audience and you understand that audience, you're going to be a lot more successful.
I think that's a really important point to underscore. I think that, if there were two words, clarity and hook, you want to establish that pretty quickly, and in any kind of story, and then you can start to unravel the narrative from there.
Yeah, I love we've done some work together, and I'd like your, I don't know if you want to explain a little bit, but your capstone approach to, telling a story. I just find there's a clinical kind of, I guess it's a 9-step way of, just thinking about the boxes to think about. I don't know if you got a chance to summarize it real quick.
Of course. I mean, the quick summary is there's a particular storytelling structure, if you like, or a conversation structure. We call it a pitching architecture, but you could think of it as a conversation structure, or a storytelling structure, I suppose. And capstone is an acronym for clarity, authority, problem, solution, the why, opportunity, next steps, and essence. And each of those stages has a certain goal or objective that we want to get across. But it's kind of what I was intimating earlier on, which is our experience is, I think an audience cares less about someone's personal why until such time as a problem's really been established and they're connected to that problem and they can see how that storyteller can be of value to them. And then they're interested in hearing that person's personal why they do what they do, and kind of getting into more of that backstory. Not to say that it's the only way to do it, but I think as a rule of thumb, that's the structure that we teach our clients, which we find sort of works across most cases.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. And Barry, do you have like a process that you kind of take people through in developing that, or?
We don't really do training the way that Mike and his team.
Right, but more from, say, the consulting side, or? Yeah,
it's. I agree with what. Basically, I like that capstone approach. It's at the end of the day, it's like Winston Churchill. He apologized for sending a long note because he didn't have time to write a short note. And it was all about really understanding how do you condense to what's meaningful and impactful. And it's just revision, revision, revision. All of the slides that Mike talked about, those are the important ones. And I like the order that he put them in. And I've made the mistake. I've made lots of mistakes pitching and presenting. And eventually, if you follow Mike's approach and you just whittle it down, and practice continually in front of multiple different audiences, you're going to figure out what is your story to investors, what's your story to friends, what's your story to potential employees, what's your story to partners, and what should stay consistent is the central theme, that passion, that why, that what, that how, but your telling of it is going to change distinctly.
Excellent. And Sean, do you have like a specific storytelling process as well, or kind of growth process?
Well, I mean, Mike had a good one, so we can just say that one on this one. I think if I go back to because I guess the advantage I may have in this space is I'm I'm a marketer, but I'm also an entrepreneur. I always go back to my threefold kind of Procter and Gamble approach, which kind of has done me good over a period of time. It's like, what's the accepted consumer belief to get people nodding, right? Or customer belief?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the reality that we both share? What's the benefit that you're bringing to the table? And then what's your reasonable belief? What's your proof points that make that true? And I think that's probably so important for an entrepreneur, because really, what are you selling? You're selling yourself. You're probably selling an idea. You probably don't have a lot of assets or money to bring to the table. You're trying to attract that. So finding those pieces of social proof and kind of pieces of authority that says, yeah, I'm willing to bet my chips on this person, even in the absence of other things that I might, if this was like a real kind of bigger company.
Fantastic.
And Doyle, do you have one?
I've got my own built-in process. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to asking, those questions that really kind of help make the concepts come to the surface. What is your true value? What actually makes this business work? How does it actually deliver value, and not just value in terms of an exchange, money for an asset or whatever the case may be, but what value are you delivering over time as well? And to me, that's kind of helps you scale and grow the business, as well as not looking at it sort of as a specific transaction. Here's my value. There you go. You're on your way. But how do we actually grow that and change that value over time as well?
Can I maybe just add to all of that one of the I think a really helpful way to clarify your own story is to whether it's recording into your iPhone or writing, just writing. But when we write, we kind of allow the brain to let those surface ideas settle down onto paper, and they're safely captured somewhere. And then when you can let those surface ideas settle down, you can start to delve deeper into your experience, journey, your insights, and just the process of writing is hugely clarifying. And maybe you're a person who speaks into a microphone, you might do webcasts like this, but our experience is just typing and writing is a really helpful way to clarify ideas and really like distill down the story to its essence.
I throw one last one thought in here, and it's specifically for entrepreneurs. Go easy on yourself when you're telling your story. It's going to take time. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad pitches. You're going to have misfires. Go easy on yourself. Forgive yourself, because this is a hard enough journey without you starting to castrate yourself in the process just because, you had a misfire one day. It's going to happen, and just let it happen and move on.
I was thinking that would be a wonderful question and wonderful discussion. What was the worst pitch you ever had?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah. We might have to save that one for another day. What was your best pitch and your worst pitch? No, excellent tip, Barry. Thank you so much. And Mike as well. Sean, did you have a final tip that you wanted to kind of recommend to watch out for, or don't step in on the way to the top?
Well, I think we're all very comfortable in the digital landscape now. I'm a huge fan of A/B testing just for brands and clients that I work with. I think you can use that same principle on yourself, right? I'm currently launching an innovation project where, I've taken a 3-month journey where I've teased out certain messages in a very similar way and see which ones got more traction with an audience that I wanted. So, gone are the days where it's like you needed to do a national tour and do like focus groups and whatever. It's just like having good coffee conversations with people and having kind of some level of digital feedback that says, okay, I think you're on the right track here versus, crickets over here in terms of other things that I put out. And I always find it interesting. As much as I'd love to say I'm a good marketer, like the web always brings back interesting kind of not foreseen kind of news at times.
Yeah. But the good thing is that it's quite instantaneous, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, I mean it's real time. Like, the average lifespan of a tweet is 20 minutes, so you'll probably know at least in an hour whether something has caught traction or not.
Good or bad, yeah.
One of the metaphors that springs to mind is sharpen your axe on the stone of the market. And
deep.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to do it, Sean.
Yeah, well,
that's like almost Games of Thrones. Like,
exactly.
You've gone medieval on us here.
Well, that's a good discussion. I think we might have to do that one again then. Mike, how do we get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with us is to head to Dent, DENT.global, or if you want to connect with me directly, just go to MikeJamesReid, REID.com.
Fantastic. And what about yourself, Barry? How do we get in touch with you?
You can first check out, and we'd love for you to join our alpha at Equo, and you can find that at www.equoshift.com, EQUO shift, SHIFT.com, and you can always reach me at Hillier, HILLIER.com.
Fantastic. And Sean?
Wiki-brands.com as always, and I'll just add another kind of topical footnote. We've just done a study on something called the Business Stage Act. So it's how do keynote speakers tell their stories well. So I know it's not specific to this topic, but I found a lot of really interesting surprises. So if you follow that hashtag, you'll probably come across a report and some slides that we did on that.
Fantastic. And yeah, we'll have Mike and Barry, we'll have the links as well in the comment section of the video. So everybody can actually get in touch with you quickly and easily. All right. So thanks for watching and listening to the Wikibrands Collective webcast, Growth and Scale. Go to wiki-brands.com/webcast for more episodes like this on some of our amazing think tank discussions. Thanks to our guests, Mike Reid from Dent Global, and Barry Hillier from Equo Toronto as well, and Sean Moffitt, Managing Director, Wikibrands. I'm your host, Doyle Buehler. If you learned something, please like and share, or simply ask us a question, and we'll respond as quickly as possible. We have some amazing shows coming up as well on Wikibrands Collective Webcast. Take a look at wiki-brands.com/webcast to find out more. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Sean. Have a great day, and we'll see you online.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care, Joe.
Have a great day.